The clinking of celebratory champagne flutes shattered abruptly, echoing an ominous silence across the room, precisely when my sister, Eliza, cleared her throat with an exaggerated, almost theatrical flourish, effectively turning the annual, usually tense family Thanksgiving dinner into a hostile, impromptu courtroom where I was instantly appointed as the bewildered, unwilling defendant. The air in my mother's cramped, over-furnished dining room, typically heavy with the comforting scent of sage, roasted turkey, and generations of passive-aggressive resentment, suddenly crackled with a much more volatile, dangerous energy, unadulterated, toxic envy that quickly solidified into avarice. Eliza, never one to let a moment pass without ruthlessly stealing the spotlight, raised her glass high above her head, her eyes fixed on me with a malevolent sparkle that betrayed years of festering professional and personal resentment, her smile too wide, too sharp, too deliberate to be genuine. "To my baby sister Clara," she announced, her voice pitched perfectly to carry across the room and silence the nervous, oblivious chatter of the younger cousins, who, according to the latest, most confidential financial disclosure statement, now boasts a personal net worth of precisely $150 million. A collective, unified gasp swept the room, freezing every fork and every hand midair, a sound more shocking than a gunshot. I'm Clara Vance, the self-made founder of a highly specialized AI data firm, and in that horrifying, suspended instant, Eliza didn't just state a private financial figure, she detonated a catastrophic social bomb under our entire extended family structure, brutally exposing a level of wealth I had meticulously labored to keep private and secure for over a decade. That single, reckless sentence, delivered out of pure professional spite and deep-seated personal failure, was the explosive hook that instantly transformed my family from merely dysfunctional into a hungry, calculating mob, marking the definitive, inevitable start of a cold, silent war I knew with chilling certainty I had to win with surgical precision and absolute finality, strategically turning their sudden, insatiable greed into the very sophisticated instrument of their perfect collective undoing. The immediate aftermath of Eliza's devastating announcement was a grotesque, slow-motion transformation, the comfortable, familiar masks of familial affection and polite indifference slipping away completely to reveal the raw, hungry, avaricious faces beneath, faces contorted by sudden, uncontrollable covetousness. The atmosphere shifted instantly and irrevocably from awkward, stunned shock to a palpable, predatory reverence, the kind usually reserved for royalty or sudden lottery winners, but focused entirely on my silent, rigid, stunned presence at the head of the table. My mother, usually quick to criticize my choice of modest, professional attire and my absence from traditional family life, suddenly enveloped me in a smothering, almost suffocating hug, her eyes darting nervously toward Eliza before whispering, loud enough for the entire 20-person table to clearly hear, "My beautiful, brilliant girl, did you remember to get comprehensive flood insurance on the small condo you so generously gifted me? We really should talk about urgent upgrades now that you are so successful." My perpetually scheming Uncle George, who hadn't returned my legitimate phone calls in over 3 years, immediately materialized at my elbow, suddenly eager to discuss the complex, unforeseen tax implications of such a staggering fortune, subtly but firmly offering his dubious expert consultation services for an unspecified yet clearly enormous percentage-based fee. I looked slowly around the table, seeing not the familiar, beloved faces of my childhood, but 30 pairs of calculating eyes, each individually assessing and calculating their personal, legitimate percentage of $150 million, instantly assessing how my hard-won, private success could immediately alleviate their chronic, self-inflicted financial inadequacies and irresponsible spending habits. Eliza, meanwhile, watching the self-induced chaos she had so expertly created, leaned back in her chair with a look of immense, chilling satisfaction. She hadn't gained the money herself, but she had successfully destroyed my peace, shattered my hard-won privacy, and proven that I could never truly escape the toxic, relentless gravitational pull of our needy, self-centered, small-minded family. Her act of petty, public jealousy was the ultimate, undeniable confirmation of their inherent toxicity, cementing my cold resolve that radical, painful, and permanent moral surgery was necessary to save my life and my sanity. The foundation of my considerable wealth, my highly successful company, CogniStream Analytics, was a direct, painful testament to 15 years of brutal, silent labor, intellectual sacrifice, and a determination forged in the unforgiving fire of extreme childhood poverty and consistent family dismissal. I grew up in stark, constant contrast to the easy, careless spending habits and financial recklessness of my extended family, watching my parents struggle endlessly and feeling perpetually dismissed by the richer relatives during holiday gatherings for my unmarketable, solitary obsession with obscure data science, predictive modeling, and complex algorithms. My rigorous specialization in developing proprietary, hyper-efficient machine learning algorithms for high-frequency financial modeling had allowed CogniStream to quietly dominate a lucrative, highly specialized niche market, leading directly to the massive, confidential buyout from a large Wall Street firm that yielded the astonishing $150 million figure Eliza had just so maliciously broadcast. My past was a constant, powerful reminder of how hard, how relentlessly I had fought for every single dollar, and the family's sudden, grasping entitlement felt like a deep, personal, unforgivable insult to my years of professional sacrifice and intellectual output. Eliza, meanwhile, had pursued a predictable series of failed, high-profile vanity projects, always relying on my parents for financial bailouts, constantly comparing her perceived failure to my quiet, undeniable, towering success. Her deep-seated professional jealousy and immense personal resentment provided the chilling, clear motive for her public betrayal. She couldn't possibly match my professional success, so she deliberately chose to destroy the privacy and security I had painstakingly built around it, openly hoping the resulting financial chaos and emotional pressure would finally bring me down to her own level of perpetual anxiety and public scrutiny. This escalating emotional pressure was overwhelming, a direct, aggressive assault on the core value I held most sacred, my hard-won privacy and the irreplaceable security that privacy afforded. The immediate escalating flood of requests began the very moment the dirty dishes were cleared from the table, transitioning quickly and shamelessly from suggestive, veiled remarks to outright aggressive entitlement-fueled demands, creating strong, persistent tension hooks that defined the subsequent weeks. My perpetually bankrupt cousin, Ronnie, cornered me by the coat rack the following morning, his breath smelling faintly of cheap whiskey in desperation, suddenly proposing I immediately loan him a non-negotiable $2 million to revitalize his demonstrably failing chain of artisanal hot dog stands, promising a highly improbable 5% annual return, a ludicrous, unbankable offer that would be instantly laughed out of any legitimate financial institution. My mother, abandoning her previous subtle hints, presented me with glossy, expensive brochures for a stunning new ocean view penthouse condo in Miami, explaining dramatically that my father's recently diagnosed severe asthma really requires that specialized coastal air, effectively demanding a multi-million-dollar immediate residential upgrade. The individual requests quickly became layered, complex, and mutually exclusive, demonstrating their total lack of coordination or self-awareness. My estranged brother suddenly needed seed capital for an untraceable blockchain venture that sounded suspiciously like a textbook pyramid scheme, while an elderly aunt began weeping hysterically about her impending minor knee surgery, claiming only the finest private German clinic would suffice to save her mobility, which coincidentally required a non-negotiable $500,000 upfront payment. They weren't humbly asking for compassionate help, they were aggressively demanding their long-overdue share, operating under the toxic delusion that my privately earned money was communal property and existed solely to immediately solve their chronic, self-inflicted financial problems and irresponsible spending habits. Their sheer, unmitigated entitlement and brazen willingness to completely ignore my decades of hard work and struggle fueled my growing cold certainty that simply saying a direct no would be wholly insufficient. I realized I needed to administer a harsh, unforgettable, surgically precise lesson that would permanently and irrevocably inoculate me against their destructive avarice. I realized that a simple, logical refusal of their myriad demands would only serve to instantly brand me as selfish, cold, and uncaring in the toxic, self-serving family narrative, leading to years of passive-aggressive martyrdom, manipulative guilt trips, and constant emotional drain, effectively keeping me tethered indefinitely to their financial and emotional demands. My revenge, therefore, needed to be a decisive, one-time act of permanent separation, strategically targeting the root cause of their current abhorrent behavior, their insatiable, blinding greed, and using my own unique expertise in sophisticated data modeling and complex behavioral analysis against them. I decided to set up the ultimate financial honeypot, a sophisticated, seemingly exclusive investment opportunity that would demand total, uncompromising financial commitment from every greedy, willing family member, forcing them to willingly liquidate their tangible, existing assets to raise the necessary, substantial entry capital. My primary goal was not raw financial destruction, but moral and behavioral exposure, meticulously creating a high-stakes scenario where they would willingly sacrifice their real, hard-earned financial stability for the dangerous fantasy of rapid, effortless riches provided by my supposed generosity and influence. This strategy was complex, legally precarious, and required flawlessly covert execution. Leveraging my advanced skills in digital forgery, contract obfuscation, and complex legal language to create the perfect, believable financial illusion. The immense what happens next for my family was a rapid, self-engineered descent into a financial delusion where their greed would inevitably lead them to betray their own common sense, their few remaining legitimate assets, and, critically, their loyalty to each other, all under my watchful, cold, analytical scrutiny, finally providing the ethical and moral justification for my final, permanent separation from their lives. My immediate, calculated first step was the clandestine establishment of the financial honeypot, a perfectly convincing illusion of an exclusive, high-yield investment vehicle. I utilized my private shell corporations to create a dummy entity named Nexus Global, complete with a complex, high production value corporate website detailing its proprietary, cutting-edge predictive quantum data arbitrage technology, a concept intentionally dense, technically incomprehensible, and sufficiently vague enough to instantly impress my financially illiterate and overly ambitious relatives. I then carefully leaked a single, meticulously crafted fake press release hinting broadly that Nexus Global was a small, pre-IPO investment opportunity critically connected to my own massive recent corporate buyout, offering the potential for a mythical, unheard-of 1,000% return within a guaranteed 18 months. To strategically heighten the perceived exclusivity and urgency, I introduced 3 core non-negotiable requirements. A minimum entry investment of $500,000 per individual or couple, a mandatory demand for absolute, military-grade secrecy regarding the nature and existence of the investment, and, most critically, a mandatory due diligence process that required every potential family investor to submit detailed financial disclosure statements, sign a predated ethical conduct agreement, and provide a full itemized list of every tangible asset being liquidated and sold to fund their participation. This final, intrusive requirement was the core of my deep intelligence gathering, allowing me to audit their current morality, document their financial desperation, and definitively expose the true depths of their manipulative intent, providing the evidence needed for my final defense. The family, entirely predictable in their avarice, swallowed the elaborate bait whole, their desperation for easy, rapid wealth blinding them instantly to the obvious, numerous red flags in the Nexus Global pitch deck. The minimum $500,000 entry fee, initially designed to be prohibitively high for most of them, had the exact opposite, devastating effect, instantly forcing them into a frenzy of desperate asset liquidation, reckless borrowing, and internal scheming, creating intense, self-inflicted financial tension across the entire family network. Cousin Ronnie, immediately abandoning his doomed hot dog stands, quickly mortgaged his primary residence to the absolute hilt, taking out a loan with an obscene interest rate. My mother, convinced the Ocean View condo was merely a minor, temporary sacrifice for unimaginable future wealth, immediately put her current, fully paid-off home up for a quick, below-market value sale. The sheer velocity and scale of their descent into greedy insanity was breathtakingly rapid. Within mere weeks, they had stripped their lives bare, shedding tangible, irreplaceable stability for the empty, cruel fantasy of my guaranteed riches. My mandatory due diligence audits provided absolutely chilling objective documentation of their true underlying character. I received confidential voice recordings of family members backstabbing each other to secure the limited investment slots, offering to pool resources only to immediately plan to cut out the less wealthy, trusting members once the mythical payday arrived. The deep emotional storytelling was permanently written in these damning documents. It wasn't just transient greed. It was an ingrained, corrosive selfishness that proved without a doubt they would never value me for anything other than my financial output. The internal scramble for capital within the Vance family quickly escalated into outright venomous family warfare, providing constant riveting mid-story tension hooks for my monitoring. My brother, facing imminent financial ruin after realizing his cryptocurrency scheme was dead on arrival, tried repeatedly to convince my elderly, fragile Aunt Agnes to liquidate her small, legitimate, and safe retirement fund, promising to manage the money for her, a clear and documented attempt at brazen financial elder abuse. I strategically intercepted his communications and recorded his manipulative tactics, adding another layer of cold, undeniable evidence to my personal dossier on his moral failings. Eliza, initially suspicious but ultimately consumed by her own toxic vanity, became my most complex and dangerous adversary. She was initially wary, but her desperate need to prove she was smarter and more commercially astute than the rest of the family, and thus more deserving of a larger slice of my money, led her to invest heavily, liquidating her few remaining legitimate assets and throwing herself into the Nexus Global venture with a terrifying, manic intensity. She even brazenly attempted to secure a second mortgage loan against my mother's already encumbered property, an action that, had I not controlled the entire financial process, would have instantly left my mother entirely destitute. I allowed the chaos and betrayal to peak at its most devastating point, meticulously documenting every lie, every manipulative conversation, and every single act of financial cannibalism, knowing that this evidence of their collective moral bankruptcy was the real weapon, far more effective and valuable than the $150 million they desperately coveted. The week immediately preceding the final signing and fund transfer deadline was a masterpiece of controlled emotional pressure and social manipulation. I hosted a deliberately ostentatious and luxurious dinner at a private exclusive club in the city, forcing the family, now financially stretched to the breaking point and living precariously on borrowed funds and high-interest credit, to maintain the elaborate, exhausting pretense that they were already part of the global financial elite. They boasted loudly and vulgarly about the inevitable, life-changing returns from Nexus Global, bragging openly about the supercars and second coastal homes they planned to buy, their faces shining with a repulsive mixture of arrogant entitlement and sheer financial desperation. This high-stakes social setting was deliberately chosen to contrast sharply and cruelly with the immediate reality of their precarious financial position. They had all previously signed the detailed, complex legal disclosures, which I had carefully laced with clauses that, while not explicitly illegal or fraudulent on my part, locked their entire invested capital into a legally complex, utterly inaccessible escrow account upon final transfer. The true legal nature of the money transfer was expertly disguised under highly impenetrable, multi-layered financial jargon, ensuring they would never dare consult an outside honest lawyer for fear of instantly breaking the mandatory secrecy agreement and irrevocably losing their supposed 1,000% return. I watched Eliza, her eyes glittering with a terrifying mixture of suspicion and greed, signing the final paperwork, her signature trembling slightly with the palpable weight of the enormous sum she was about to commit. The intense "what happens next?" was no longer about if they would lose their money, but about how and when I would finally reveal the agonizing, total truth of their self-inflicted financial exposure and moral ruin. The carefully choreographed day of the investment finalization arrived, a quiet yet intensely tense gathering, held at a neutral lawyer's office I completely controlled and discreetly owned. One by one, the family members proudly and fearfully transferred their liquidated capital, a cumulative sum of over $12 million, into the designated Nexus Global escrow account, their fingers shaking visibly with a mixture of excitement, anticipation, and fear of the unknown. Once the final irrevocable wire transfer was confirmed and the money was securely locked away, the lawyer, a trusted non-family colleague and partner in my actual firm, produced the final, heavy, official contract for them to countersign. This was the moment of the cruel, precise, and total reveal. Instead of the expected IPO share allocation agreement, the contract they were presented with was titled in stark, simple lettering, "The Vance Family Trust for Ethical Reinvestment and Conduct, 5-year term, Schedule A, Principal." The room instantly erupted into a chorus of confused, panicked shouts and questions. Before they could truly process the financial and legal shock, I stepped forward from the corner, calmly retrieving the now countersigned contracts from the table. "Thank you all for your collective investment," I stated, my voice cold, steady, and utterly devoid of emotion. "This trust is indeed tangibly connected to my personal fortune, but it is unequivocally not a business deal. It is, quite simply, a mandatory morality clause. You have all just willingly and legally liquidated everything you collectively own and voluntarily transferred it into an account I control, all based entirely on the promise of a self-serving lie I fabricated." The family was momentarily frozen in horror, utterly unable to process the total irreversible reality that their money was legally gone, transferred entirely based on a delusion of my making and their own toxic greed. I then initiated the most crucial, devastating phase of the deep emotional storytelling, the public, unforgiving exposure of their calculated moral failings and acts of betrayal. I retrieved a small, discreet projector and began playing the recorded videos and audio snippets captured during my rigorous due diligence period. The screen lit up with damning, irrefutable footage of Ronnie fraudulently negotiating the mortgage on his house, my brother cynically manipulating our elderly aunt with false promises, and audio recordings of Eliza coldly planning to cut our more distant, poorer cousins out of the supposed future profits. The immense emotional pressure on the family instantly turned inward, away from me and towards each other, erupting in shouts of mutual accusation, blame, and desperate self-defense, realizing with horror that they had betrayed each other for absolutely nothing. I methodically presented the indisputable evidence of their liquidation, the executed deeds, the sold investment assets, the drained retirement funds, all gone, replaced by a useless, legally binding complex trust agreement that yielded them zero return. I revealed the cold, technical truth that the actual $12 million they had transferred wasn't lost to a hacker or a bad investment, but was now legally locked indefinitely into an irrevocable 5-year charitable trust, entirely controlled by me. Their collective financial ruin wasn't caused by my malice. It was the direct, documented, undeniable result of their own blind, self-destructive, and all-consuming greed. The near-ending cliff-style twist arrived with the chilling entry of external authority, completely validating the necessity of my extreme pre-planning. The city police, who had been discreetly waiting in an adjacent room, called by my lawyer not to investigate fraud against the family, but to investigate potential money laundering and documented financial elder abuse by the family against each other, calmly entered the room to take official statements regarding the documented manipulation and fraud. As the presence of uniformed law enforcement officers chilled the already tense room into absolute silence, Eliza, utterly broken and desperate to deflect the immediate legal focus from her own recorded attempts at fraud against my mother, let loose a final, devastating, unexpected confession. "You can't do this, Clara. I got that net worth figure from your own personal lawyer, Mr. Davidson. He gave me the confidential file. He's the one who broke the confidentiality. He said you wouldn't be able to stop me from leveraging the information." She didn't just expose her source for the net worth information, she explosively implicated the supposedly trusted Mr. Davidson, the family's longtime respected attorney who managed much of my initial trust fund and whose professional integrity I had never once questioned, revealing him as the true professional mole, the original source of the privacy breach. Adding a final systemic layer of betrayal that transcended mere family greed and touched the deepest echelons of professional trust and confidentiality. The stunning final revelation about Mr. Davidson immediately and completely shifted my emotional focus, instantly validating the ethical necessity of my extreme actions. I later learned that Davidson, knowing the true magnitude of my success, had been secretly feeding Eliza confidential proprietary information for months, hoping to use the resulting family chaos to destabilize me and eventually seize control of my much larger, independent trust management portfolio. My countertrap, designed purely for my family's greed, had inadvertently fleshed out the silent, sophisticated professional predator who was working against me from the inside of my own defense structure. The powerful final emotional payoff came when I addressed my utterly broken family, now stripped of their financial stability and facing the immediate legal consequences of their self-documented greed. The $12 million will generate income, yes, but that income will be paid out annually, not to you, but to the very local charities you mocked for helping the irresponsible poor. Your principal will remain legally locked in trust for 5 years, or until you can collectively pass an annual ethical review demonstrating genuine, unsolicited acts of familial kindness and community involvement. I cut them off entirely and permanently, establishing a new life defined by peace and freedom from their debilitating toxicity. My revenge was not about taking their money. It was about forcing them to witness the tangible, immediate, devastating consequence of their own toxic greed, and in doing so, reclaiming the hard-won security and peace that my wealth was always meant to provide, ensuring my future was protected. If you liked this video and want more stories, please like, subscribe, and support the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.